Mr. Benn, Red Knight by David McKee. Read by the New Storyteller. One morning, Mr. Benn received an invitation to a fancy dress party. Really, he wasn't very fond of parties, but he did like fancy dress, and so he decided to search the shops for something to wear. After all, he thought, nothing exciting ever happens to me. I may as well make the most of it. Mr. Benn searched all day. He tried all the big stores, then the not-so-big stores, then the shops in the side streets, but all without luck. Nobody seemed interested in fancy dress, only in ordinary suits and things. Still, Mr. Benn kept trying, and at last he was lucky. In a narrow back lane, he found a tiny old shop, which was just packed with strange costumes. In hurried Mr. Benn, quite excited at finding somewhere so wonderful. The shop bell tinkled, and, as if by magic, there was suddenly a strange little man with a moustache and an odd hat standing in front of Mr. Benn. "Good morning, sir. May I help you?" he said. Mr. Benn was looking eagerly round the shop. "I wonder if I might borrow that suit of red armor in the window," he replied. The little man seemed pleased. "Of course," he said. "Perhaps you would like to see if it fits." And he pointed to a door marked "Fitting Room" in the corner of the shop. Taking the armor and going through the door, Mr. Benn found himself in a small room full of huge mirrors. He climbed into the armor and then laughed because the mirrors seemed to make the room full of red knights. Then he noticed the room had two doors. The one he came through marked "Shop," and another marked "Trying Room." "Well," said Mr. Benn, and that thought opened the second door and walked through. Instead of another room, Mr. Benn was amazed to find himself surrounded by a desolate landscape. There was just barren, rocky countryside. Then he noticed that smoke was slowly rising from behind a large pile of rocks nearby. Mr. Benn, feeling bold in his suit of red armor, decided to investigate. Climbing up over the rocks, he found that the smoke was coming from quite a large dragon. Of course Mr. Benn guessed that it must be somebody else in fancy dress, so he shouted down, "Hello! That's a wonderful outfit that you're wearing. And how on earth do you make that smoke?" Flames burst from the dragon's mouth. "You can't fool me," he called back. "I know that you have been sent to kill me." Slowly, it dawned on Mr. Benn that this was a real dragon, and at the same time the dragon realized that this red knight didn't have a sword, so he couldn't mean any harm. In a short time, Mr. Benn and the dragon were sitting down together, with the dragon telling his story. It seemed that the dragon had lived happily in a castle, working hard at the family trade of firelighting for all the nearby houses. Everybody loved him, especially the king. Then one day a visitor came to the castle with a new idea for lighting fires. He called it a match, and the visitor was a matchmaker. Of course nobody wanted this new idea. After all, the dragon was so reliable. The matchmaker wasn't content. He set fire to a barn or two and saw that the dragon got the blame. Gradually, he made things so bad for the dragon that it was banished from the castle, leaving the matchmaker to charge what he liked for the matches and so get rich. To make matters worse, the king's favorite white horse had run away from the castle, and the dragon was blamed for this as well. "Here he is, you see," said the dragon, showing Mr. Benn the white horse standing on the other side of the rocks. "I've been looking after the horse, but I'm much too afraid to turn it." "Come along, my friend," said Mr. Benn. "I'll help you. Show me where the castle is, and I shall tell the king your story." This made the dragon very excited, and they set off almost at once in the direction of the castle, the dragon leading the way and Mr. Benn following on the white horse. After a long journey, the dragon stopped. "There is the castle," he said. And sure enough, the castle could be seen on a distant hill. "I'm afraid to go any closer," continued the dragon. "I'll hide here among these trees and wait for you to come back. Be careful and good luck." With that, they waved goodbye, and Mr. Benn headed for the castle, leaving the dragon in the trees. By the time Mr. Benn reached the castle, the lookouts had already seen him, and word had gone round that a brave red knight had slain the dragon and was returning the rescued horse. Indeed, Mr. Benn had to say little, for he was taken straight to the king to be rewarded. When Mr. Benn told the king the truth about the dragon, the king was delighted. "That scoundrel of a matchmaker has been charging more and more for his matches, said the king. He knows we have to have fires to cook and keep warm, so he has been making a fortune while we are getting poorer and poorer. The king called the guard and had the matchmaker thrown into the deepest, darkest dungeon. He can wait there until I decide what to do with him, said the king. As quickly as was possible, the king had his guard ready to ride. Then, leading the way with Mr. Benn, they set off at a great pace to welcome the dragon back. Mr. Benn made them all stop some way from the trees where the dragon was hiding. Then he and the king left their horses and walked the rest of the way so as to not frighten the dragon. The dragon was so happy that he would not let either Mr. Benn or the king ride back on their horses. Instead, he insisted they both rode on his back, and so the triumphal procession entered the town and castle, the guard led by the dragon carrying the king and Mr. Benn. Next the king made a speech to all his people. First, he told them what had really happened to the dragon. Next, he told them what was going to happen to the matchmaker. I realize matches are more convenient for most of you than a dragon, he said. And so, I will let you have all the matches you want free, and the matchmaker shall make them for nothing as his punishment. This will make things much easier for the dragon, who will become my personal firelighter. After all, he smiled, a king is entitled to something a little different. After the crowd had finished cheering, the king said, "Tonight we will have a celebration feast with the Red Knight as a guest of honor." "Oh dear," Mr. Benn said to himself. "After all that excitement, I don't think I can face a party." Soon after the speech was finished, a little man with a moustache and an odd hat, who looked vaguely familiar to Mr. Benn, asked him if he would like to change before the feast. He showed Mr. Benn to a door. "You will find fresh clothes inside, sir," he said. As soon as Mr. Benn stepped through the door, he recognized the fitting room of the shop with all its mirrors. There were the other clothes, sure enough, but they were Mr. Benn's own clothes. Stepping back into the shop, he realized somehow he didn't want to go to the fancy dress party now. "I won't take it with me after all," said Mr. Benn, handing back the armor. Right you are, sir, said the little man with the odd hat, and he smiled as if he had expected to be told that. But we shall be seeing you again, sir, he continued. Oh yes, I'll be back, answered Mr. Benn, and as he went out of the door, he turned and added, very soon. That night, Mr. Benn lay in bed and thought and thought. He thought of his adventure, and he thought of the shop, and he thought of the different costumes, the ones he had seen, and the ones there might be. He tried to think which he would like to try on next time, but he fell asleep before he had time to decide.